Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to Soldier Speaks English. Once again, this is our program format, Geopolitics East and West, in which myself, Adil Raja, and my friend Theo Mullis, investigative journalist based in London, and he's a war correspondent. He covers Ukraine war as well, a former police officer, and like myself, a former military officer. So from our journey from a gun to a pen, has been, in fact, we are hoping that it'll be fruitful for the benefit of humankind, and that is why we talk about issues which are very very much important for the humankind and for the human rights as well. So I'll welcome Theo, and straight away jumping into the latest situation, we would ask Theo about the closure of Strait of Hormuz, which is causing serious issues for the humankind. Again, that is why I brought that premise, that because the global prices, food prices, oil prices, of course, they're directly related to the food prices. The food prices have started to go up, and because the fertilizer protection is also on the low, Chinese are holding all the cards, or the Americans are holding all the cards. Both of them, but irrespective of that, the prices of goods in America are also going up. So we are witnessing an offset of a global economic crisis because of the closure of Strait of Hormuz, and there have been a lot of claims by the US administration, by the Trump administration, that don't worry about it, we will sort it out. And the CENTCOM today issued a statement that they have mined the entire the sea coast of the coastal line of the Strait of Hormuz on the Iranian side, of course, and Iranians won't be able to target any ship passing through. There are only 2 nautical miles of shipping lanes, only 2 shipping lanes available in the Strait of Hormuz at the congestion point. And well, by the looks of it, and the reports which are coming through tells us that Iranians are still holding the cards as to who will pass through these lines and who won't. So that is the situation we are at the moment. And of course, there is a lot of misinformation, disinformation also going on. But, well, the reality, the numbers don't lie. And the number is that there is an economic shock which is being faced. I mean, even in the Western world, we are starting to, face the economic shock because of the Strait of Hormuz and because of this war. And there is a lot of politics around this war going on. But let's start from the first point, that is going back to the Strait of Hormuz. Theo, how is the closure of the Strait of Hormuz impacting the global economy, in your opinion?
Well, thank you very much for the kind introduction, although I must note that during my service in the police, they never did give me a firearm, as police are not routinely armed in the United Kingdom, and I never did serve in the military. But yeah, the Strait of Hormuz is one of those sea lanes, right? It's like the Panama Canal, it's like the Suez Canal, and to a lesser extent, like the English Channel. It's one of the great sea lanes of the world, and the world that we have created, that's been created over the last 60, 70, 80 years, relies on global trade, relies on. And one of the cornerstones, in fact, one of the cornerstones of international law that people tend not to argue about, is the freedom of navigation of the sea. People tend, although, there's some arguments here and there with the 9-dash line and China, but we'll move past that. So the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, one of these major choke points, because there's only one real way to avoid it if you want to bring goods from the Far East or the Middle East, etc., to Europe or into the Atlantic. You'd have to go way down, past Africa, which is a very long old way. So 20% of global oil supply passes through these straits. That's 20 million barrels a day and about $500 billion in energy trade alone annually. It's also critical for liquid natural gas, fertilizer, as has been said, and chemicals. So all of this is going to hit basically every supply chain. And that is going to have an enormous effect. So we saw the immediate shock to oil prices spiking up. FT's reported it as the worst oil supply disruption since the 1970s. And that's going to cause, down the line, a spike in inflation, which will cause a spike in real-term prices for everybody. Now, this is bad. This is very bad for basically everybody. The possibility of another global recession cannot be ruled out if the straits remain closed, because this is not, this is also not something that the world was immediately expecting. Trump and Netanyahu didn't consult their allies, didn't consult the rest of the world on this. And what's clear is that despite the fact that any war plan against Iran worth its salt must have had, they are going to attempt to close the Strait of Hormuz, because that's their that is their ace in the hole for them. And the fact that the Americans seem to be surprised about this when they really shouldn't be, and I'm going to put that down to the administration, because there's no way the Joint Chiefs were surprised about this, is indicative of their rank incompetence. I mean, we discussed in earlier episodes, you don't go to war without a plan. Again, there doesn't seem to have been a plan.
But Theo, plan is always the first casualty of war.
Yeah, but you still got to have one. And if you don't, in fact, not just one, you have a plan and a contingency and a contingency and a contingency.
All right. So, Theo, fair enough. So what do you say to the politics surrounding around this Iran attack by Israel and US, in which the UK security advisor who attended the US-Iran talks and judged that the deal was within reach? I mean, and there's been exclusive in Guardian yesterday. They said that Jonathan Powell thought Iran's surprising offer on its nuclear program could prevent a rush to war. So, irrespective of that, there was a rush to war, and now people are forced to say that it is. People are forced to say that it was because of Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, both of very close pals of President Trump. Yeah. So both very close pals of President Trump, and both being considered alleged assets of Israel. So if that is the case, then what benefit Israel would get out of pushing the US into this war prematurely?
Well, let's not forget that Rubio also let slip that the Israelis were going to do this anyway, before having to walk that back down the line. What benefit did the Israelis have? Well, I think for Netanyahu especially, bear in mind he's been prime minister on and off since 1996.
Yeah,
this has become Iran has become his bête noire. He has become so focused on Iran that it has become for him ideological. And let's not forget that Iran is a chaos actor, or has been a chaos actor, not just for Israel, but for other countries throughout the region. They and further afield, the Revolutionary Guard assist in moving drugs through Iran and into Europe. They've repeated attacks on other neighbors. So, it does go beyond Israel, but Israel had, and I think Netanyahu especially, and I might be veering into sort of, great man theory, although Netanyahu is not a great man, it's just the name of the theory, where he has become so focused, and it's about his individual thinking. Now, has Iran been pursuing a nuclear program? Have they been pursuing nuclear weapons? Yes. But have the Israelis and the United States been quite effective at slowing that down? Yes. And this attack, I mean, especially coming after the 12-day war, when Trump said, we've destroyed their capability to create a nuclear weapon. And this attack simply, I think, does boil down to on the part of Netanyahu ideology and on the part of Trump, yeah, as we've discussed in previous episodes, many different factors, but I think, you know, you've got wag the dog and you've got you've got ideology and incompetence.
Yeah, so Theo, you said since the program format is geopolitics, East and West, you've given the Western perspective. Let me give you the Eastern perspective. Once I go to the Eastern perspective, they said, all right, yeah, the Western perspective is that Iran is a chaos actor. Fair enough, because the Eastern perspective is that they have been put under sanctions for last so many decades, so they have to find ways like North Korea to go around it, and they are doing that, and that will definitely create chaos. All right, so now the other point of view, the politics is that America, through the now there is the biggest divide in the Muslim world is the Shia Sunni divide, right? So the people across this divide, on both sides of these divides, say that, listen, the thing is that America has been controlling the Muslim world, the Middle East, through, you know, controlling the monarchies and the rulers and the dictators of the Sunni world order, and that is how they're maintaining their, you know, the rules-based world order, or whatever you may like to call it, or their own hegemony. All right. But the problem is that now during this conflict, once the basic question for the Americans is that whether it's America first or Israel first, because right now the interpretation of this conflict is, the interpretation of this conflict is that it's Israel first right now, even in America. So this is the basic question. And once you ask the Eastern public, because I've conducted this poll, as you can see, I said, who do you support in the current conflict? And mind you, I've got a following of around 1.8 million on this profile at Soldier Speaks on X, and obviously most of them would be from the East or from the Muslim countries. I hope so, but I believe that I've got a diverse audience based in London. But anyway, the result comes out that 98% people support, out of a sample vote of 5,000 in 24 hours, 98% people say that we support Iran, and only 2% say US and Israel. So I think it's a public policy disaster, perception disaster, and perception is much more important than reality. So this is the counter narrative. What do you have to say to that, Theo?
I absolutely agree that this is a soft power disaster for the United States. And I think that is recognized amongst most people with their head screwed on right. As far as my takes on the Iranian regime, well, they would, you know, that regime would kill me for being who I am. I'm not a fan of the place, and I look forward to the day that the Ayatollahs fall and that Iran can be its own country. I would hope in a free democracy with its own cultural characteristics, etc. And yeah, I've spoken to people from the Iranian resistance movement, such as Dr. Ali Safavi, etc., who are trying to move forward along that path. But I don't think this helps them. And my sympathies lie with the normal people who are caught up in this. I understand to a very limited degree what it is like to be in a city that's being hit with an air raid. It is pretty awful. And the guy who has a market stall, the guy who's a doctor or an engineer or just trying to live their life as the vast majority of people are, they're the ones who have my sympathies. I have no sympathy for the Ayatollahs. I have no sympathy for the Revolutionary Guard Corps at all. And my overall take on this is that this is a needless and unforced error on the part of the United States, and certainly on the part of Israel. And there does have to be a question, there is a question, of course, that has to be asked as to why does AIPAC and the pro-Israeli lobby in the United States have such disproportionate influence? And I think it becomes a sort of hot button issue. And let's not, you know, and almost a third rail issue. And I think it's one of the only countries which can actually accurately claim to have a special relationship with the United States. But is it worth it for American voters? Is it worth it for, Joe Public sitting in Arkansas who works on a farm? Probably not.
So the basic question is, again, the question is being asked now. It was never asked so openly, but it is now being asked that to the Americans and even to the British, who are cousins as far as the Americans are concerned. Is it America first or Israel first?
Parents. I prefer parents.
Yeah, parents. All right. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Fair enough. They won't agree to it, but all right. Fair enough. So,
no, they won't. I'm going to get some flack for that.
Anyway, so is it America first or Israel first then?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, as far as I think it's a question that historians are really going to have to dig into as to whether the United States has been led by the nose into this war. And it gets quite, I think it needs to be viewed with a clear head. But I think that there is a risk of that because of the influence that their lobby has got. And I think it speaks as to the wider influence of significant political lobbies in American democracy and how the power of significant finances has put their democracy on a path to decline. And as that's decline in democracy itself. And it comes down to campaign finances, things like Citizens United, where the Supreme Court, it's a perverse ruling. The Supreme Court said that the giving of money was free speech and could therefore be protected and privatized, made private. And that is extremely dangerous. Now in the United States, you need an enormous amount of money to be able to run a successful political campaign. And that it's bad for democracy because it gives far greater influence to far fewer people.
So, all right. So the answer is it has to be America first, but
I don't think it. I don't know. I mean, if you're talking about America first and MAGA, I think quite a lot of the base of MAGA feel quite betrayed by this.
Yeah.
But I think, again, as I said, it speaks to the disproportionate influence of wealthy political lobbies. And AIPAC is an extremely wealthy political lobby.
That's true. At the end of the day, it goes down to money, and it's no more. A lot of conspiracy theories in our time are becoming reality. Like I was reading the story today, the declassified documents, the American documents, that tells us that the CIA has been trying to poison our weather and control the weather. It used to be a conspiracy, but now, all the conspiracies of our childhood seems to be becoming a reality in our lifetimes. Well, that's scary. Theo.
So it's scary, but I do think we need to be. I do think we need to be careful when it comes to conspiracy theories. Not because conspiracies don't happen; they do. But I think that once you go down too much of a rabbit hole, you can start looking for them where they may or may not exist, and you should apply Occam's razor to everything.
True. Fair enough. Following the journalistic standards, we should tread carefully. But journalistic standards can only be followed where there is freedom of expression. And in countries like Pakistan and countries like even United Arab Emirates, before going to Russia, let's go there. What's happening in Dubai, Theo? They're arresting people for making videos of damage to their own home, inside their home, for their own selves, not even sharing it on social media, only sharing it with families back here in the UK. Listen, we are fine. This is the damage. But even then, they are being arrested and they are being denied access to lawyers or to the High Commission. What's going on there? I mean, the Dubai glitter and the plastic town of Dubai attracted a lot of Britons. The sun, and the glitter and the shine, it attracted a lot of Brits, and tax-free status as well. But now the Dubai dream is coming down, it's crashing down on those who dare to speak up openly about it. But this kind of authoritarianism, and we are talking about an ally, a US ally, a UK ally. We're not talking about Russia as yet. So what does it tell you? That are we heading for a forever war scenario, like the George Orwell gave in this book of his, the 1984, that there will be a forever war, and because of the fear of forever war, the authoritarian regimes would rule the world? Is that what's going on? What's your opinion about that?
I think there are a number of different questions there, and I absolutely want your take on this as well. So let's focus on the UAE and why they're doing this, and I think it comes down to the fact that they are an authoritarian state, and some of these foreigners, immigrants living there from Britain, etc., probably didn't really know this. They're not our best, and I think they're very concerned about their image. They are probably very afraid of being seen as a country at war, because so much of their image has been very carefully fostered into this this plastic town, this Las Vegas of the Middle East. That anything that could threaten that, they see as a threat to their state, as a threat to the future, as a threat to their economy. So they're going to do what they know to do. They're an authoritarian state. They're going to act like one. And I think that surprised some of the immigrants from the West who have moved there, because probably they didn't know. Those who have gone there for tax avoidance, tax evasion, and are now crying out for assistance from the British government. I hope that there is a kind representative from His Majesty's Revenue and Customs there to meet them at the airport if they are to be returned.
Yeah, that's true.
I have a lot to say about Britons, especially who move to Dubai, and then especially those who then post online and say how wonderful it is there and how terrible it is back in the UK. I have quite a lot of thoughts on those people, and they're not sympathetic ones.
Yeah. So I guess you wanted my opinion about the Orwellian concept of the forever war, right?
No. I think let's focus on Dubai, because we have a small question and then we have an enormous philosophical question here.
Yeah. So I agree with your comments about Dubai. Your comments are very true. The Dubai is built on perception of safety and security in a very volatile region, which is I think unfounded. And now the perception is being broken, and that is why the Dubai real estate market has crashed around to 60%. So that is really bothering them, and that is why the crackdown is coming hard. That's there, fine, but then moving to the philosophical question, that the authoritarian was always there, as you say. We just did not want to acknowledge it. It was always there in Dubai. And countries like Arab monarchies, they're always there. And countries like Pakistan, they're always there. Wheresoever there is a hybrid form of governance or a monarchy, you'll find authoritarianism over there. That is fine. But this kind of a rule, authoritarian rule, to make it a global phenomena, you need a perpetual war, and that is what George Orwell, wrote about in 1949 in his book 1984. Right? He said there will be a perpetual war, there will be an endless conflict, and there will be no victory, and there will be a no end, and the war would not be for territory, the war would not be for ideology, but the war would be for control. Right, so that people stay scared, right? So they stay scared, and the system, right? The current system of democracy, it collapses, and it is replaced by an authoritarian system. And then we've got people like Thiel who are saying the antichrist is coming, and you'll have a global governance, a single order governance. The end time fascist, they jump in, and if you mix both of these theories, then that's what I was saying, that a lot of conspiracy theories from our childhood seems to be coming true. Well, they'll come true or not, that is yet to be seen, but people are definitely trying to move in that direction. So
I don't think
that is
it's
what I was talking about.
conspiracy theory to say that there are fascists in the world who would like to see the end of democracy, and some of them are very wealthy and live in the West. And I think Peter Thiel is one such individual. He is a very dangerous man, an unfortunate mix of religious zealotry, intelligence, and political sort of fascism. I think he believes in a sort of techno-oligarchic meritocracy. I've probably read too much Ayn Rand, and believes that humanity would be better led by those who are proven to be economically successful because they are clearly better decision makers, and they can guide the people, and they can and it's very dangerous. So no, I don't think 1984 is the more, and this is a debate people have had since the books came out. I don't think 1984 is an accurate vision of the future. I think the one that Peter Thiel would go for is more Huxley and Brave New World.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But
Brave New World was, in fact, if I recall correctly, written as a response to 1984. The more likely dystopia.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's a technology-driven rule, and well, we need to talk more about it, but that is not our topic. Otherwise, there are people who do not prioritize money over their own or their own principles, and that is a very, again, Orwellian concept, maybe, or a concept which most of the people with money do not understand. Anyway, forget about that.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so it's a very long debate. But talking about fascist, you were talking about fascist, and we are talking about fascist. Russia have shut down the internet. What's going on over there, Theo?
So so earlier this month, Russia's been carrying out large-scale mobile internet shutdowns. So your phone being able to connect to the internet, and this has happened across the regions of Russia before. Remember, Russia is a continental empire. And the imperial hub, the imperial center, is Moscow and St. Petersburg. And if you want an idea of this, look at a map of Russia's rail networks. It spokes out from Moscow. And what's different now is that since earlier this month, those internet shutdowns have hit Moscow and Petersburg. So they've been carrying them out in the imperial center, and that is crippling apps like banking, taxis, communications. And the Kremlin has said, yeah, we've been doing this. Dmitry Peskov said all disconnections are carried out in strict compliance with current legislation due to the need to ensure security. So there's two sort of narratives that are going on. One is that they need to do that to ensure that Ukrainian drones cannot effectively target. They're saying Ukraine is using Russia's mobile internet network to guide the drones in. And Moscow is now experiencing Ukrainian drone strikes, as are many other cities across Russia. Ukraine's targeting critical national infrastructure, munitions factories, etc. And what we've seen is another narrative coming out, that this is a part of an attempt to build what they're calling a sovereign internet. And if you want a parallel, I would look to China. They want to build their own great firewall. And it's been quite significant, the scale of this. 37,000 hours of outages across Russia, affecting nearly the entire population across all the regions. Moscow, in Moscow alone, 3 to 5 billion rubles have been lost in terms of economic turnover. That's about $63 million. And people were unable to do these basic things. And now they're going to be testing a sort of an internet whitelist, so you can only access state-approved sites, and want to make people move to state-controlled platforms. So one that they've just recently banned is Telegram, the messaging app, which was used by soldiers at the front to do basically everything, even up to and including call-in fire support, call-in an artillery strike, request logistics. They want to force people onto their own program called MAX, or MAX. And people think that this, moving into this sort of China-style controlled internet, it could be due to fears of a coup or fears of internal unrest. The Russian mill bloggers, who are generally a source quite a lot of journalists in the West look at for thinking as within the Russian military, saying that this may be due to an upcoming general mobilization. Bear in mind that Russia is mobilized pretty heavily already, and sweeps people off the streets, etc., for their war in Ukraine. And this is part of a mitigation strategy against unrest or dissent over that. So there's a lot of potential whys, but the what is essentially shutting down the internet and attempting to build a China-style Great Firewall.
Well, that's great. That's very interesting. But even China, irrespective of all these measures in place, have not been able to control the internet, because even in China, through VPN, you can access the sites you want to access. So there will always be a business of the counter firewall business would always be there. The Pakistanis recently imported this $30 million software, firewall software, and they implemented it in Pakistan. Now, this is a very pertinent example. They implemented the firewall in Pakistan. They spent $30 million, around about $30 million, and they brought in this special infrastructure as well. But it didn't work for them. Instead, it cut down the freelancers, revenue coming in. It cut down, and the banking systems, they had to operate on VPNs. The trading systems had to operate on VPN. The internet speeds would go down and under because of these firewalls. So after 2 years of trying these various measures and spending millions and millions of dollars on loan in an impoverished country, they had to let go of the idea, and they had to, let go of the firewall concept, because it's not working in an ever-increasing integrated world. Or, you cannot simply disassociate or cut yourself out. But if you're looking at a dystopian scenario, well, maybe that might be possible in that case, but it's not working. There'll always be people who are working against the authoritarian regime, and that is why your platform, Dictators versus Democrats, is very important. So, any final words about the future, Theo?
Actually, I'm reminded of an early noughties sci-fi show called Firefly. Brilliant show, cancelled far before its time. But a line in that is, you can never stop the signal.
You can never stop the signal. That's true. So resistance will go on no matter how much you want to suppress the freedom of expression. It is not only a basic human right to speak up, but a desire as well. And where there is a will, there is a way. So people will keep on finding the way. With these words, I would bid you farewell. Thank you, Theo, for joining us.
Farewell. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.